Hello everyone, this is Celine and welcome back to the Rachelle Anne Miller YouTube channel. Today I'm sharing a new sneak peek from the new release that will be launched on October 14th. This one is called Polar Bears and I just fell in love with this amazing digital stamp. Now this stamp can be used for so many occasions. Personally, I am going to use it for Christmas now, but I'm already planning on using it once for a baby card, because this little hat on the left can be a hat to go to sleep as well, and the scarf, well, it's just cold there. So therefore I think there are many occasions to celebrate with this card, and today is just only one of all of them. So I'm using my Copic markers to color today, and I printed this digital stamp onto Translucent Perfect coloring paper. And I must admit, I just completely think that this is so adorable. I am trying to get some shadows on top of the polar bears, although I want to keep the illusion of them being white. So I have the idea of my shadow being on the left side, on the upper left, and so I'm adding all my shadows on the right side. Now I started really soft, but then later on, once I added all these, I decided to add a bit of a darker color as well, just to have it a bit more contrasting. But first I went really subtle to not ruin the images, and I just did some flicking. As you can see here, I'm starting on the bottom and I'm flicking upwards, and then where I have some overlapping parts like the scarf or the hat, I'm adding a bit more shadow around that, and then I'm using a lighter marker to flick further and have it fade into the white area of the bears. Now I added the C3 as well, and all the other gray markers are of course also an option, but in the end I will go just until C7 even. So this was all about building up, and normally I would go from darkest to lightest, but in this case I had actually never colored a polar bear like this, and I just preferred starting subtle and adding more if I wanted to. So that's why I just started really soft, and then for the noses C7, C5, really subtle. And then the other color that I will be using is red. A pop of red everywhere is just fabulous. It always helps with your card, if you ask me, and I just love it. So C5 now on top of the white area to get some shadows, and afterwards I will do exactly the same, doing again a bit of flicking to get that color faded out into the white area thanks to the other markers that I have. And that's just how I build everything. If you want to start immediately with a darker marker, that's fine, and I think in the future that I know that I can use a C5 and still have a wide idea of a polar bear, I think I will do that immediately. But when I started, I didn't know that yet, so it's all about building up at that moment, I think. So again, still flicking, and with the bigger one it was really handy to try out the darker color. Also, I could have left like this and not do the darker color on the tiny bears, because well, you can vary in the color of their fur, of course. And also I was a bit afraid, I must admit, that when I started adding the darker color to the tiny images that it would appear immediately really dark. But I just kept going and flicking into the white area, and that really helped me. So here, for example, I first thought that that was going to be ugly and that there wouldn't be any white left. But actually it worked out, so I cannot complain. So I did this really slowly. As you can see, I also kept everything in the video, just because it might help you. If you think that this is a bit too slow, I already sped it up, but if you think that it's too slow, you can always speed up your videos on YouTube if you want to. And here I am finishing off the noses And then I went for the pop of red. These parts where I'm adding the red are really subtle and tiny. So I did my best to not go over all those details that Rachelle Anne Miller adds, because they are just perfect. The dots on the head and then the stripes on the scarf. But for a Copic marker, from time to time, depending on the size that you're printing it can be really daunting to get it colored in. But I just went really softly and really slow. And also, having this tiny area, I wasn't really concerned about doing a gradient. For example, with scarf, I didn't do that throughout the lines, but I did use my markers going to the top of the scarf, being a bit glider. You will see that in a second. But it was just too small, the stripes, to have it ink blended and all those things that you might want to do in regular parts of your image. For me, this was a bit too detailed. So here I switched to a lighter marker just because I went to the top where the light source would be. And that's what I did. As simple as that. Now, today is a card with some failures and some fixing, and I just wanted to mention that because I love it like this, and I was going to do an ink blended background. Now, I used some masking paper, which I use all the time and never had trouble with. But today I had some issues while removing the masking tape. And so my heart broke at first, and then I tried ways to fix it. And it worked out, and it of course wasn't what I intended to make, which was in the beginning a bit getting used to for me, but I asked around and a lot of people said to me that they really liked the effect, so I just wanted to show it to you as well, in case you have this issue like I had, then it might help you if you like it as well. So to trim this panel out, I am using my Waffle Flowers A2 layers die. I'm also going to make a frame with it later on, but this is the biggest one, so it will fit onto my A2 sized card. And once I trimmed that out, it was time to figure out what I was going to do exactly with these images. And I found this stem set Bold Holidays from Hello Bluebird, and I am going to white heat emboss it later on this card. Now, isn't this gorgeous? It will say Joy on Earth, and with these images, I don't know why, but I just thought that it was perfect. So I have this stamping mask paper, as I said, it's from Inkadoo, and normally never have had any issues with it. Never. But you will see later on. I am, first of all, troubled when I'm trying to remove the backings, but that was not the issue for today. But it always takes a while, and then I'm adding it, making sure that I'm lining it up correctly. And then we will do a bit of a gradient on the back, a bit of ink blending. And really soft. I didn't want to overstep here. I have a really soft gradient in the back. And that was the whole idea, because I have white polar bears and I didn't want to have a really dark background and then a striking white polar bear on the bottom. But the idea was to have a gradient, a blue gradient, and to have it fade out into the area where the polar bears are, to represent the snow or the cold that is there. So the distress inks that I'm using are Chipped Sapphire, Faded Jeans, Stormy Sky, and I will also add a little bit of Black Soot after I added my first layers of blue. So as you can see, I'm building up that gradient, and I'm not changing my blending brush because these are all the same blues, and I also need transition between each of the colors. And from time to time that can really help to use the same blending brush if you want to get that transition going on. Also, I just love the Stormy Sky Distress ink. It's a really soft one, but still with a lot of color in it, and I just love that. So as you can see here, I'm stopping with the ink blending, quite subtle, fading it into the white, but not completely underneath the polar bears. I want that white already starting before it reaches the paws, just because this way it seems like there is more of that snow behind them as well. So now I'm adding more of that ink. After the first layer, you also can see how low you can go with the darker colors. I tend to go really subtle with my first layer to not go too far, because once you got too far, it's really hard to get rid of that ink. So that's why I can now go a bit further and then have that gradient even better. So once I was happy with the ink blending that I did, I could remove my masks, and here is where it happened. So again, normally I don't have any issues with removing the masks. I don't. But in this case, apparently it was a bit too sticky and I ripped my paper. And I did that on the bottom, so where the snow is and where I kept everything really soft. So I went really careful once I tried the images, and there I had no issues. It also took me a while, and normally I can get it off really slowly, but in one piece. But for the bigger image, that didn't work as well. So something happened. Did they add more stick? I don't know, but now I'm a bit afraid of using it again on a future card. Of course, what you can always do is first add the masking paper onto the top of your hand, and so you can get a bit of the stickiness off. So that's something that I will definitely do in the future, using this paper, but I don't know what happened here. I truly don't know. And I'm really lucky that that didn't happen on the images themselves, but it happened on like the bottom, and well, I didn't know what to do actually. Something that also could have done was to fussy cut the images, but fussy cut it with the sky as well. That would be an idea, but I had this ripped paper, and then I tried with my adhesive eraser to get rid of some excess stickiness, and then I just looked for a way to fix it, and I thought of my Versamark pen that I have here. I never use it actually, but I have it. It's not that wet anymore, but I just started scribbling a bit of this ink on the bottom of my card, and this way I wanted to cover up the area where I had that ripped part. So I went over there, and then I took my white embossing powder. I didn't want to get onto the images, so I just went over it and did it really roughly. That was the idea. I still wanted that hill to be visible where the little one is popping out of, and I just added that white embossing powder. Of course, I didn't prep anything because I thought it was good, but apparently still some stickiness of the masking paper on my images, so I just went over it really quickly with a paintbrush, and I had my embossing powder left there where I wanted to have some snow. So now I actually created some sort of a snowy area with a bit of embossing powder, which is definitely an idea that you can do. And I went over it a few times. I heat set it, and then I added a bit more of that rough Versamark on top of it to have it really, I wanted it to appear logic as well. From time to time when you walk through the snow, you have that gorgeous even snow area, and then you have all the areas where there is new snow, or people walked on it, or people didn't walk on it, and therefore there is more snow over there. And I thought maybe, just maybe, we can represent that this way, and then we have covered that area and no one will know. No one will know. So for this edition of Some More Versamark, I did use my anti-static power tool just to help me and not have all the bears again full with embossing powder. So also here I just did some rough strokes. I didn't want it all to be covered with the embossing powder. I really just wanted the idea to be there. And then where the embossing powder was laying on top of the black lines from Rachelle Anne Miller's her design. I just removed it using my tweezers. You can use anything you want, but I didn't want to get rid of those gorgeous elements that make it so unique about Rachelle Anne Miller. Those swirly lines that I truly adore. I really wanted them to show up as well. And then I heat set this again. Like that. And so I truly must admit it was getting used to, because it wasn't like that in my head. And yeah, I truly asked around. Like, I asked my parents, my friends, my boyfriend, and my fiance, must I say, well, they liked it. So I just kept looking at it, and well, I started to liking it as well. Just once I got rid of my original idea that I had in my head, because sometimes you can truly be stuck in there and you think that that's the only way to go, and once something goes wrong, you're a bit upset about it, which is logical. You had an idea and it didn't work out. But if you can let it go, maybe slowly, if you can let it go, then you will truly appreciate what you have, and then maybe see the beauty about your changes that you did have to make. So white helium was the joy on earth, and now we are going to finish that panel. This is a winter scene, and it can really be like that. But since I have that snow on the bottom with my embossing powder, I thought my white gouache will represent the same sort of thickness and brightness of my embossing powder, and so I started splattering on top of my panel. Now, if you have white gouache like me and you find that when it dries, you can sort of see the ink from underneath getting through, then try to add less water to dilute it to be able to splatter. I just add a little bit. I try if it is splattable. I don't know if that's a word, but if it's that, then I stop adding water, because the thicker you keep your gouache, the more opaque it will be once it dried as well. So here I just added a bit. This paper cannot handle water, so I wasn't trying to add lots of snow or anything like that. You just, from time to time, if you use really thin embossing powder, you can have some sort of gaps inside of the embossing that you did, and I had it on the bottom, and I just thought maybe I can fit it up a bit with the gouache that I still have on my paintbrush. So I did that, but it wasn't really needed. And I didn't paint anything extra. I just went on top of the embossing powder to not ruin my paper, which cannot handle that. Okay, so I just splattered a bit more, and then that was my panel. So then it was time to think about the rest of the card. Now I decided to let it dry first, and then I wanted to have a frame. A frame always works, so I just use the A2 layers die again from Waffle Flowers. Use the two outside, the two biggest rectangles that are inside of this set, and that's how I created my frame. I prefer adding them together with some purple tape before adding it on top of the paper, so that I can see whether it's sort of even. And once I have that, I can just lay it on top of the paper and cut it out and have a really thin frame here. I'm going to add that using some liquid glue to the outside of my panel, and this way it will have a bit of a finishing detail. And I'm really slowly adding it. It's with liquid glue, so if I need, I can bend it a bit to fit perfectly. And then I'm going to add this panel on top of a card base using some adhesive roller. Any roller works. I just prefer using a roller. This way I have some wiggle room, but afterwards it will be permanently on there. So I did that, and then I'm finishing off my images using some glossy accents on the noses. I just think that's gorgeous, and on that heart, and that will be it. This is my card, a really simple one. We had some trouble on the making, but we fixed it, and I really liked how it turned out, so I hope you do too. I want to thank you all for stopping by. Don't forget the release day is October 14th, and there are some incredible new digital stamps that you will absolutely love. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back soon. Bye!